Well, good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, whichever it might be, where you are right now. This is Converging Media, Chapter 14, the last chapter of the book. I'm going to try to go ahead and get this done and get it up. This is about global media and the digital. The first thing the book talks about is four theories of international mass communication. One is authoritarian theory, and it exists in authoritarian states whose governments exert direct control over the mass media. They use the mass media not only to inform the public of important events, but also to shape public opinions in support of its government and its policies. Libertarian theory, also called free press theory, rests on the belief that the individual should be free to publish whatever she or he or the group might prefer. Criticism of the government and its policies is accepted and even encouraged in this theory. Social responsibility theory. It holds that to provide the most reliable and impartial information to the public, the media in a democracy should be free from most governmental restraints. However, it also holds that the media should act in a socially responsible way and do things for the good of the people. The Soviet theory of the press, it asserts that the media should recognize their responsibility to the people and self-regulate their content, but self-regulate their content in a way that helps the greater good, which is the Communist Party, the party that's in control. We need to be aware of that. Going forward, it starts talking about the public sphere, and public opinion. The public is sort of a new middle class arose that became known as the public, and it became a right in most capitalist countries and even in some others, even in some socialist and communist countries, a middle class has arisen. The public sphere is a conversational forum in which people discuss and debate mutual interest in societal issues. And of course, that public sphere is largely gone digital anymore. It talks about public opinion is the notion that the public shares views and ideas about a topic, and these ideas guide the public's actions. Then there's a concept called counterpublics, where there are public forms of resistance created by those who consider themselves to be marginalized within the dominant media and communication. That's changed a great deal. The media in the United States especially, and in other countries as well, has become more inclusive and including more people within it, both of color and also various sexual orientations and other things along that line, various groups and that had at some points in time been marginalized have now received a place at the table, so to speak, and been given more coverage, more representation, even not just on the news, but also in TV shows and things along that line. The tyranny of the majority is actually expresses the idea that government laws and policies can benefit the majority without concern for the welfare or the rights of other groups and individuals. And so that's something that can be an issue. Some political and socioeconomic issues within global media and developing companies, of course. There was cheap labor costs, low taxes, and a lot of, in certain countries, the media has become huge. The movie industry in India is a great example of how a country that was not necessarily and is not necessarily considered one of the top tier countries in terms of prosperity, has a huge industry in terms of movie producing, the whole thing with Bollywood, so to speak, as they call it. Talks about, I'm not going to get into some of these things where they're addressing one specific issue that happened. Talks about the digital divide, though. Nearly 80% of people in developed nations have internet access. In undeveloped nations, or nations that are sort of hopefully emerging economies, the world average is far, far less. And the world average is 42%, which tells you that if it's 80% in developed countries and the world average is 42%, it kind of tells you how low it is in many, many areas. It talks about global media and local values. There have been sort of a new worlds or cultural imperialism. It talks about cultural imperialism is when a foreign country dominates a domestic media market through an influx of its products. And we all know that a great deal of the media from the United States, the TV from the 70s, 80s, 90s, has gone overseas in the many, many, many medium markets, because some of those countries did not have the same, they had the ability to broadcast a great deal, but didn't have the same production company amount of production for their local country that we had. And so it was a good way to get in product that people could watch, just bring it in and put it there. Netflix, Hulu, most of those things that you might watch, if you watch the scroll, the credits till the end, you'll see all of these different languages that they're listing, who the actors were that use their voices in all these different languages so that they could air in other countries. Talks about media hegemony. It's a concept that asserts that the dominant class in society controls the mass media largely through ownership. And I would say that's probably more true today than ever, because of the fact that the mass media has converged down into 3 or 4 or 5 major companies who pretty much own every kind of media that there is, from newspapers to radio stations to television stations to just, I mean, you name it, social media, other things. And it's become just a huge, very few people owning almost everything that there is. As far as convergence, there are those who are not happy about convergence. This digital technology can also disempower companies that have traditional control of media production and distribution. There are companies that sort of got passed by, and then they found that they were in a weaker state economically, and other larger companies, a lot of the social media companies especially, and the digitally integrated companies such as Comcast and Disney, who owns, well, they say Disney owns the world, but ABC and a lot of the cable companies, and of course they bought out the Star Wars production and I forget what the comic book company they bought out was, but they bought in all of these things, and it's just a powerhouse. Now let's talk about global media flow. Western news agencies have historically produced as much as 80% of the news that is distributed globally. So what you see on CNN, what you see on Fox News, what you see on many of these other cable news networks are being aired in many other countries. I'm going to go forward a little bit now. And the book then talks about promoting global voices. There's more representation on our cable now of other news sources than there was at one point in time. Al Jazeera now, I think, is on DirecTV and other cable channels. Anyway, but this is a fairly short chapter in terms of what I'm going to lecture on. That's the end of chapter 14, and I'm going to get this up, and you can look at the media career section if you're interested, and also look back and look forward. But that's going to be the end of chapter 14 for the sake of our lecture purposes, and I am going to again get this done and get it up online.